The road into the town was narrow and mostly straight, with long stretches where nothing much changed. On either side, fields lay open and flat, broken only by the occasional tree that seemed to have grown wherever it happened to land. The sky above was pale and clear, without any strong color, as if it had decided not to draw attention to itself. A single bus moved along the road at a steady pace. It was not full. A few seats were taken, though most were empty. The bus made a quiet, steady sound as it moved forward, neither loud nor soft, just present enough to be noticed if someone listened for it. Inside, the air felt still. The windows were clean, but slightly dulled by age, giving everything outside a faint blur. The seats were covered in a dark fabric that had faded unevenly over time. Some places were smoother than others, worn down by years of use. The bus passed a small sign marking the edge of town. The sign was simple, white letters on a dark background. It had likely been standing there for many years, long enough that most people no longer noticed it as they passed. The town itself was quiet, not empty, but unhurried. Buildings were spaced comfortably apart, as if no one had felt the need to crowd them together. Most were only 1 or 2 stories tall. Their colors were muted, chosen more for practicality than appearance. A grocery store stood near the main road. Its parking lot held a few cars, parked with space between them. The store's sign buzzed faintly, though the sound was barely noticeable unless someone stood close. Down the street, a bakery sat between 2 other shops. The windows showed shelves inside, though from the outside it was difficult to see much detail. The door opened occasionally, letting out a brief movement of air, then closed again. The bus slowed as it approached the center of town. It stopped briefly at a small shelter with a bench beneath it. No one stood waiting there. The bus waited anyway, just as it always did, then continued on. Further along, the houses became more frequent. Each one was different, but only slightly. Some had small front yards with trimmed grass. Others had gravel paths leading to their doors. A few had porches with chairs that looked as though they were rarely used. One house had a light on inside, though it was still early in the evening. The light did not seem particularly bright. It simply filled the room it belonged to, nothing more. A person walked along the sidewalk, moving at an even pace. They were not in a hurry. They were not stopping either, just walking, hands at their sides, eyes forward. The bus continued past them. Eventually, the bus reached its final stop. The engine idled for a moment before turning off. The sound faded slowly, leaving behind a quiet that felt settled rather than sudden. The driver sat still for a moment, then reached forward to adjust something on the dashboard. Outside, nothing changed. A short distance away stood a small building with a sign indicating it was a guest house. The sign was modest, attached to a wooden post. The letters were plain and easy to read. Inside the guest house, the air smelled faintly of clean fabric and old wood. The floor was smooth, worn down by many years of footsteps. A small desk stood near the entrance, with a bell resting on top. Behind the desk, a shelf held several keys. Each key was attached to a tag with a number written in simple ink. Some of the tags were more faded than others. A clock hung on the wall nearby. It ticked quietly, marking time without emphasis. A person stood at the desk, checking a small notebook. They turned a page slowly, then another. Their movements were careful and practiced, as though they had done this many times before. Outside, the town continued its slow rhythm. A car passed along the main road, then disappeared from view. Somewhere, a door opened and closed. A light turned off in one of the houses. The evening settled in gradually. There was no clear moment when day became night. The sky simply dimmed, color by color, until it rested in a softer shade. In a nearby room, a window was slightly open. The curtain moved just a little, stirred by the air. It did not move far, only enough to show that the air was still there. The room itself was simple. A bed against one wall, a chair near the window, a small table holding nothing but a lamp and a folded piece of paper. The lamp was off. The paper had been folded once, then again carefully. It stayed where it was, untouched. From the window, the view looked out over the quiet street. The pavement reflected a small amount of light from a nearby lamp. Shadows lay softly along the edges. Nothing happened for a while. Time passed in the way it often does in places like this, slowly, but without feeling long. A distant sound could be heard now and then, not close enough to identify clearly, just enough to remind anyone listening that the town was still there. In the guest house hallway, footsteps moved from one end to the other, then stopped. A door opened. Later, it closed again. The clock on the wall continued to tick. Outside, the bakery's lights were turned off one by one. The grocery store followed soon after. The street became darker, though not completely. A single street lamp remained on near the corner. Its light spread out in a wide, uneven circle. A cat crossed the road beneath it. The cat did not hurry. It paused briefly, then continued on its way. The houses stood quietly, each holding its own small stillness. In one yard, a tree moved slightly in the breeze. Its leaves made a soft sound as they brushed against one another. Further down the street, a fence ran alongside a narrow path. The fence was made of wood, with paint that had peeled away in places. It leaned just slightly, though it remained standing. The path beside it led nowhere in particular. It simply connected one street to another. No one walked along it now. The night continued in this way, calm, uneventful, ordinary. Nothing demanded attention. Nothing needed explanation. The town rested in its usual state, unchanged and unremarkable, exactly as it had been the night before, and the night before that. The town had always been like this, not especially old, and not particularly new either. It existed in a way that did not draw attention to itself. People passed through it without much thought, and those who stayed rarely talked about it as anything more than practical. Most days followed a similar pattern. Shops opened at roughly the same time each morning, doors unlocked, lights switched on, deliveries arrived and were unloaded without comment. By evening, everything reversed in a predictable order. There was comfort in that routine, though few people ever said so. The streets were laid out simply. One main road ran through the center, with smaller streets branching off in no particular design. Walking through the town did not require much effort. It was difficult to get lost, mostly because there was little reason to wander far. Buildings served their purposes and nothing more. The grocery store stocked what people needed. The bakery made the same items every day. The guest house offered rooms to those who required a place to stay and rarely asked questions. Weather passed through the town gently. Rain came and went without causing problems. Wind moved through the streets, shifting leaves and dust, then moved on. Snow, when it arrived, stayed briefly before melting away. The town adapted without complaint. In the early evenings, activity slowed. People returned to their homes. Curtains were drawn partway. Lights came on in kitchens and living rooms. Radios played quietly in the background of ordinary tasks. Meals were prepared without hurry. Nothing elaborate, just enough. Outside, the streets became quieter, though never completely silent. A car might pass. A door might open. Somewhere, a television could be heard through an open window, though the words were never clear. The guest house settled into its usual nighttime rhythm. Keys rested on their hooks. The desk remained tidy. The bell stayed untouched for long periods at a time. Rooms were plain, furnished with only what was necessary. Beds, chairs, lamps, everything placed where it had always been. From one of the windows, the view of the street remained unchanged. The same stretch of pavement, the same street lamp, the same row of houses. Nothing about the scene suggested anything unusual. Time moved forward without announcement. Minutes blended into one another. The clock on the wall marked each second, though no one seemed to notice. Somewhere nearby, water ran through pipes. The sound was faint and brief. In the distance, a train horn sounded once, then faded. It did not stop here. The town remained as it was, steady and uneventful, continuing its quiet existence without interruption. The next day began the same way most days did in the town. There was no clear signal that morning had arrived, only a gradual change in the light. The sky shifted from dark to pale, and the outlines of buildings became easier to see. The street lamp near the corner remained on for a while longer than necessary. It did not turn off immediately. It waited, as if unsure whether it was still needed. Eventually, it went dark, leaving the street looking mostly the same, just slightly less defined. A window opened somewhere along the street. The sound was brief and soft. The window stayed open, allowing fresh air to move inside. In the guest house, the hallway looked no different than it had the night before. The carpet lay flat and undisturbed. The walls held the same framed prints that had been there for years. Each print showed a simple scene: a field, a tree, a narrow road. At the front desk, the clock continued its steady ticking. A page in the notebook had been turned at some point, though no one remembered exactly when. Outside, the bakery opened first. The door unlocked. Lights inside flickered on. A faint warmth spread into the cool air each time the door opened. The smell that followed was familiar and unchanged. Not long after, the grocery store followed. A delivery truck stopped briefly, then moved on. Boxes were carried inside and stacked neatly out of the way. A few people walked along the sidewalk, each moving at their own pace. Some carried bags, others carried nothing. None of them appeared to be in a hurry. The town eased into the day without effort. In one of the houses, a kettle was filled and placed on the stove. The sound of water running lasted only a moment. The kettle heated slowly, without drawing attention to itself. Elsewhere, a radio played quietly. The volume was low enough that the words blended together, becoming more like a rhythm than a message. By mid-morning, the streets held slightly more movement, though still very little. A bicycle passed. A door opened, then closed. A short conversation ended quickly, without much being said. Nothing lingered. At the guest house, a room was cleaned. The bed was straightened. The chair was pushed back into its usual position. The window was opened briefly, then closed again. The room returned to the way it always looked. Outside, clouds moved slowly across the sky. They did not bring rain. They simply passed overhead, changing shape gradually as they went. The town continued on. Around midday, the bakery door opened more often. A few customers came and went. Each transaction was simple. No one stayed long. The grocery store saw the same pattern. People entered. They selected what they needed. They paid. They left. The afternoon arrived quietly. Light shifted again, becoming softer. Shadows moved slightly along the pavement, then settled. A dog lay in a patch of shade near a fence. It did not move much, only adjusted its position once before settling again. In a small yard, laundry hung on a line. The fabric moved gently when the breeze passed through. No one came out to check on it for a long time. The guest house remained calm. The bell at the desk stayed silent. Keys remained on their hooks. The clock continued. Later, a person sat at the small table near the window in one of the rooms. The folded paper remained where it had been. It was not unfolded. It did not need to be. The person looked out the window for a while, though there was nothing specific to see. The same street, the same buildings, the same quiet. Eventually, they stood and moved away from the window. The chair made a soft sound as it shifted slightly. It was pushed back into place. Outside, the afternoon began to fade. Shops prepared to close. Lights dimmed, doors were locked, signs were turned off. The street grew quieter again. The sky changed color gradually, without drawing attention. Pale blue softened into something deeper. The edges of buildings became less defined. The street lamp near the corner came back on. Its light spread out in the same uneven circle as before. A car passed through the town, then disappeared down the road. No other cars followed. In the guest house, someone walked down the hallway, then stopped. A door opened. Later, it closed. The evening settled in. Somewhere, a television turned on. The sound was low. It stayed on for a while, then turned off again. A light in one of the houses went dark. Another stayed on. The town did not change. Night arrived without ceremony. The sky darkened fully. Stars appeared faintly, though they were not especially bright. The street lamp continued to glow. A cat crossed the street again, taking the same path as the night before. It paused briefly, then moved on. The bakery was closed now. The grocery store was dark. Only the guest house showed a light near the front desk. Inside, the clock marked time steadily. Each second passed without notice. The hallway remained still. In one room, the window was opened just slightly. Air moved through quietly. The curtain shifted a little, then became still. Nothing else happened. Time passed. Later still, the light at the front desk was turned off. The guest house rested. Outside, the town remained quiet. The same streets, the same buildings, the same calm. There was no sense of anticipation, no sense of ending, just continuation. The night moved forward at its usual pace, unchanged and uneventful, carrying the town with it into another stretch of quiet hours. The following morning arrived much like the one before it. Light appeared gradually, without a clear beginning. The sky shifted from dark to a dull gray and then slowly toward something lighter. There were no strong colors. Nothing stood out. The street lamp near the corner turned off again, slightly later than necessary. It did so without sound or signal. The street looked the same afterward, just a little less defined. A delivery van moved through the town early, stopping briefly near the grocery store. The engine idled while a door opened and closed. The van stayed only a short time before continuing on. The bakery opened its door once more. Lights came on inside. The smell that followed was familiar and unchanged. Nothing new was added to the display. Everything was prepared the way it always was. A person swept the sidewalk in front of the bakery. The motion was slow and unhurried. Dust moved briefly, then settled again. Across the street, a shop window reflected the pale light of the morning. The reflection shifted slightly as someone walked past, then returned to stillness. In the guest house, a door opened and remained open for a while. The hallway filled with light from one of the rooms. Eventually, the door closed again, and the hallway returned to its usual dim state. The front desk remained neat. The bell stayed untouched. Keys hung in their places. The clock continued to mark time. Outside, a few people walked through the town. Their steps were steady. None of them stopped for long. They passed each other without conversation. A bicycle leaned against a fence near the path that connected two streets. It had been left there before and would remain there for most of the day. Clouds moved slowly overhead. They did not form any clear shapes. They drifted, changed slightly, and continued on. The town followed its routine. By late morning, the grocery store saw a small increase in activity. People selected items from the shelves. Bags were filled. Payment was made. No one lingered. The bakery followed the same pattern. A few people entered. They left with small bags. The door opened and closed at a steady pace. The guest house remained quiet. A room was cleaned. A window was opened, then closed again. The bed was made carefully, smoothing out any creases. The folded paper on the table remained untouched. It stayed where it had been placed, without reason to move. The afternoon arrived slowly. Light softened. Shadows shifted along the street, then paused. A cat slept in the same place it had the day before. It did not move for a long time. A fence along the narrow path cast thin shadows on the ground. The paint on the wood continued to peel in small, uneven patches. The path remained empty. Later, a person walked through the guest house hallway and paused briefly near the window. They looked outside, though there was nothing particular to see. After a moment, they continued on. The hallway returned to stillness. Outside, the town remained unchanged. No new sounds appeared. No new movement drew attention. The afternoon stretched on quietly. A breeze moved through the street, lifting a few leaves and carrying them a short distance before they settled again. The leaves stayed where they landed. In one of the houses, a door opened. Someone stepped outside briefly, then went back in. The door closed behind them. A light turned on, then off again. The sky continued its slow shift toward evening. Shops prepared to close once more, signs dimmed, doors locked, windows reflected the fading light. The street grew quieter. The street lamp turned on again as the light faded. Its glow spread across the pavement in the same familiar pattern. A car passed through the town, then another. After that, none followed. The guest house front desk light remained on for a while longer than the others. Eventually, it too was turned off. The hallway stayed quiet. In one room, the chair remained near the window. It had not been moved since earlier in the day. The window was closed now. The curtain hung still. Night settled in fully. Stars appeared faintly in the sky, though they were partially obscured by passing clouds. The stars did not draw attention. The town rested. Somewhere in the distance, a train passed without stopping. The sound was faint and brief. The street lamp continued to glow. The bakery and grocery store remained dark. Houses showed only a few lights now. Most were turned off. The guest house remained still. Time passed without noticeable change. Later, the street lamp flickered once, then steadied. The pavement beneath it looked the same. The cat crossed the street again, taking its time. It paused near the fence, then continued on. Nothing followed. The night continued quietly. The town remained unchanged, moving forward through the hours without interruption, carrying on its steady, uneventful rhythm. Another day followed, arriving without announcement. The sky lightened gradually, as it always did, and the town emerged from the dark without effort. The buildings looked the same as they had the night before. Nothing appeared new. The street lamp turned off again, leaving the corner in its usual state. The pavement showed faint marks from previous days, though no one remembered how they got there. A window opened somewhere down the street. The sound was brief. The window stayed open for a while, letting in the cool morning air. The bakery unlocked its door once more. Lights came on inside. The shelves were filled in the same order as before. No one rearranged anything. A person stood behind the counter, moving slowly, checking that everything was in place. Nothing needed adjusting. Across the street, the grocery store opened shortly after. A delivery arrived, just as expected. Boxes were carried inside and stacked neatly near the back. The town eased into the morning without pause. A few people walked along the sidewalk. Some walked alone, others walked in pairs. No one spoke loudly, no one stopped for long. A bicycle passed, then disappeared down one of the smaller streets. The street returned to stillness. In the guest house, the hallway remained quiet. Doors stayed closed. The front desk light was on, though no one stood there. The clock continued its steady movement. A page in the notebook was turned. The sound was soft and brief. The notebook was placed back where it belonged. Outside, clouds drifted slowly across the sky. They were thin and pale, offering little shade. The light remained even. The morning passed quietly. At the bakery, customers arrived one at a time. They made simple choices. They left without delay. The door opened and closed at a slow, regular pace. The grocery store followed the same pattern. People moved through the aisles calmly. Items were placed in baskets. Payments were made. Bags were carried out. No one lingered. The guest house saw little activity. A room was checked. The bed was straightened, though it had already been tidy. The window was opened briefly, then closed. The folded paper on the table remained folded. It stayed where it was. By midday, the town had settled fully into its routine. The streets held light movement, but nothing drew attention. A dog lay near a fence, shifting position once before resting again. It remained there for most of the afternoon. A narrow path between two streets stayed empty. Leaves gathered along its edges, unmoved. The afternoon arrived without change. Light softened slightly. Shadows moved a small distance, then stopped. In one house, dishes were washed. The sound of water ran briefly, then stopped. The kitchen light stayed on for a while. Elsewhere, a radio played quietly. The volume remained low. The sound blended into the background. The town continued on. A person sat near a window in the guest house, looking out at the street. There was nothing to watch, but they remained there for a while anyway. Eventually, they stood and moved away. The chair returned to its original place. Outside, the sky began its slow shift toward evening. The light dimmed gradually, colors softened. Shops prepared to close again. Signs were turned off, doors were locked, windows reflected the fading sky. The street grew quieter. The street lamp turned on once more, casting its familiar glow across the pavement. The light did not change. A car passed through town, then another. After that, none followed. The guest house front desk light remained on longer than the others. Keys hung on their hooks, untouched. The hallway stayed still. Night arrived without ceremony. The sky darkened. Stars appeared faintly, though clouds moved across them from time to time. The town rested. In one house, a light turned off. In another, it stayed on. The bakery and grocery store remained dark. The guest house showed a single light near the entrance. A cat appeared near the corner, walking slowly along the edge of the street. It paused, then continued on. Nothing followed. Time passed. Later, a distant sound could be heard briefly. It faded before it could be identified clearly. The street lamp continued to glow. The pavement beneath it looked unchanged. The guest house remained quiet. Doors stayed closed. The clock marked time steadily. In one room, the window was opened slightly. Air moved through quietly. The curtain shifted once, then became still. Nothing else happened. The night continued on in this way, without interruption. The town remained calm, ordinary, and unchanged, moving steadily through the hours as it always did. The next morning unfolded without anything to mark it as different from the ones before. Light entered the town gradually, filling the spaces between buildings in a quiet, unremarkable way. The sky held a pale tone that did not deepen or brighten quickly. It simply remained. The street lamp near the corner turned off again, as it always did. The pavement beneath it looked unchanged, showing faint lines and patches that had been there for years. A window on the second floor of a house opened slightly. The sound was soft and brief. The window stayed open, allowing air to move through the room. The bakery unlocked its door. The lock made a small sound, then nothing. Lights came on inside. The shelves were filled in the same order as the day before. Nothing had been moved overnight. Behind the counter, someone checked the display, though nothing needed adjustment. They stood there for a moment, then stepped away. Across the street, the grocery store opened not long after. The door opened and closed. A delivery arrived, as expected. Boxes were carried inside and stacked neatly in the back. The boxes were labeled, though no one read them closely. The town eased into the day. A few people walked along the sidewalk. Their steps were steady. Some carried bags, others did not. They passed one another without stopping. A bicycle leaned against a fence near the narrow path between streets. It remained there, unmoved. In the guest house, the hallway stayed quiet. Doors were closed. The front desk light was on. Keys hung from their hooks, each one still. The clock continued its steady motion. A page in the notebook was turned. The notebook was closed again and set back into place. Outside, clouds drifted slowly across the sky. They changed shape slightly as they moved, though no one noticed. The morning passed. At the bakery, customers arrived one at a time. Each visit was brief. The door opened. The bell sounded softly. A purchase was made. The door closed again. At the grocery store, the pattern was the same. People walked through the aisles slowly. Items were placed into baskets. Payment was made. No one stayed longer than necessary. The guest house remained calm. A room was checked. The bed was smoothed. The chair near the window was pushed back into place, though it had only moved slightly. The folded paper remained on the table. It was not unfolded. By late morning, the town settled fully into its familiar rhythm. There was movement, but nothing that required attention. A dog lay in the shade near a fence. It shifted position once, then became still again. A narrow path remained empty. Leaves rested along its edges. They did not move. The afternoon arrived quietly. The light softened a little. Shadows shifted across the pavement, then paused. In one house, water ran briefly in the kitchen. Dishes were washed. The sound ended quickly. In another house, a radio played at low volume. The sound blended into the background, becoming part of the room rather than something separate. The town continued on. At the guest house, someone stood near the front desk for a moment, then moved away. The bell remained untouched. Outside, the sky changed slowly. The pale tone deepened slightly. Colors softened. Shops prepared to close. Signs were turned off. Doors were locked. Windows reflected the dimming light. The street grew quieter. The street lamp turned on again, casting its familiar circle of light. The glow remained steady. A car passed through the town, then another. After that, none followed. The guest house front desk light stayed on longer than the others. Eventually, it was turned off. The hallway remained still. Night arrived without ceremony. The sky darkened. Stars appeared faintly, though clouds moved across them from time to time. The town rested. A cat appeared near the corner and crossed the street slowly. It paused briefly near the fence, then continued on. Nothing followed. Time passed. Later, a distant sound could be heard briefly, then faded. It was not clear what it was. The street lamp continued to glow. The pavement beneath it looked unchanged. Inside the guest house, doors remained closed. The clock continued to mark time. In one room, a window was opened slightly. Air moved through quietly. The curtain shifted once, then became still again. Nothing else happened. The night moved forward in this way, without interruption. Morning returned slowly. The sky lightened again. The street lamp turned off. The town looked the same as it had the day before. The bakery opened. Lights came on. Shelves were filled. The grocery store followed. People walked through the town. Some stopped briefly. Most did not. The guest house hallway remained quiet. A room was cleaned. A window was opened, then closed. The folded paper remained folded. Clouds passed overhead. The sky remained pale. The day continued. At midday, the town reached its usual level of activity, which was not much. Movement remained steady and calm. A person sat on a bench for a while, then stood and walked away. The bench remained empty. The bicycle was moved slightly, then leaned against the fence again. The afternoon arrived. Light softened. Shadows moved a little. In one yard, laundry hung on a line. The fabric shifted gently when the breeze passed through. The breeze faded. The town continued. Evening approached again. Shops closed. Lights dimmed, doors locked. The street lamp turned on. A car passed through town. It did not stop. The guest house light stayed on for a while, then turned off. Night settled in. The same cat crossed the street once more, following a familiar path. It paused, then moved on. Nothing changed. The hours passed quietly. The town remained ordinary, unchanged, and calm, moving steadily forward without pause or interruption. The day slowly came to an end. The light outside softened until it was nearly gone. Shadows stretched across the streets and buildings, then faded into the quiet of the evening. Windows glowed faintly with warm light. Curtains hung still. A few lights remained on in the houses, though most had been turned off. The town itself seemed to settle deeper into calm, as though it had been waiting for this quiet moment all along. The street lamp at the corner flickered once, then stayed steady. Its soft glow spread over the pavement and the edges of the nearby houses. A gentle breeze moved some leaves, rustling them briefly before they settled again. The guest house hallway was silent. Doors remained closed. The front desk light had been switched off, leaving the rooms in their usual muted glow. The keys hung quietly on their hooks, unchanged, as the clock continued its steady, slow ticking. Outside, the narrow streets remained empty. A cat moved slowly along one of the sidewalks, pausing briefly before continuing on. No sound followed it. Nothing else stirred. The bakery and grocery store remained dark and still. The air smelled faintly of wood, brick, and distant earth. Clouds drifted across the sky. The stars appeared faintly, dim but steady. A person sat by a window in one of the houses, looking out at the quiet street. They did not speak. They did not move much. The chair stayed in place, the table remained untouched, and the folded paper on top of it stayed exactly where it had been for days. Time passed slowly. The town continued as it always did, calm, steady, and unchanging. Each second moved quietly with no hurry. Each breath of air felt still and familiar. Night deepened. Lights in the few remaining houses went out one by one. The street lamp continued to glow softly. The cat finally disappeared down an alley, and the streets remained empty. Everything grew quiet. The gentle rhythm of the town carried on. Shadows lengthened and faded. The faint rustle of leaves stopped. The distant sounds, the soft movements, the subtle signs of life all grew still. The sky above turned a deep, muted shade. Stars remained faint but steady. Clouds drifted slowly across them. There was nothing more to see, nothing more to do. The town, the houses, the streets, the sidewalks, and the lamp all rested in their ordinary, unchanged state. Everything was calm. Everything was steady. Everything was as it should be. And so the town and everything within it stayed quiet through the night. Time passed slowly, endlessly, without rush, without urgency. The day had ended. Another day would come eventually, but for now, nothing moved. Nothing changed. Before we completely end this quiet journey, if you enjoyed this story, consider leaving a comment, hitting the like button, and subscribing to the channel. Your support quietly helps keep these stories coming. And in that quiet, ordinary stillness, the story finally came to rest.